military coup. And so all David and all his people with him, his wife, his children, and the servants, they have left Jerusalem and fled because Absalom has taken over. And all he left was about a dozen of his concubines so they could take care of his house while he was gone. So let me go ahead and read our synopsis of this particular chapter, and then I'll get busy reading the chapter. As David continues his flight from Absalom, he encounters both loyalty and hostility. Sheba, the servant of Mephibosheth, anybody know who Mephibosheth was? Son of Jonathan. This is Jonathan's son, whom David, when he found out that one of Jonathan's family was still alive, he brought Mephibosheth and told Mephibosheth, "You will now eat at my table every day." Yeah, he's the one that his nurse fell and broke his ankles or his feet or something. So Ziba, the servant of Mephibosheth, presents himself as supportive, though his motives seem to be somewhat questionable. Shimei, a relative of Saul, that's King Saul, publicly curses David and throws stones at him. David endures the shame without retaliation. You know, all he's got to do is say, "Hey, that guy," and he'd be out, but David didn't do it. Meanwhile, Absalom arrives in Jerusalem and through Ahithophel's treacherous counsel defiles David's concubines to assert his control. So let's go ahead and look at the first 4 verses in 2 Samuel. Rick, get to the right spot. 2 Samuel chapter 16. There it is. Now when David had passed a little beyond the summit, behold, Ziba, servant of Mephibosheth, met him with a couple of saddled donkeys, and on them were 200 loaves of bread, 100 clusters of raisins, 100 summer fruits, and a jug of wine. And the king said to Ziba, Why do you have these? And Ziba said, The donkeys are for the king's household to ride, the bread and summer fruit are for the young men to eat, and the wine for whoever is faint in the wilderness to drink. Then the king said, And where is your master's son? And Ziba said to the king, Behold, he is staying in Jerusalem, for he said, Today the house of Israel will restore the kingdom of my father to me. So Saul said to Ziba, Behold, all that belongs to Mephibosheth is yours. And Ziba said, I prostrate myself. Let me find favor in your sight, O my lord the king. Yeah, I don't think that's it, but okay. Yeah, but you told me that Chris was going to go get it for me. I'm sure that's what I heard you say. Oh, he said. Oh, okay. Okay, question number 1. Summary. Ziba meets David with supplies and claims Mephibosheth stayed in Jerusalem to reclaim the throne. David, without verifying the story, rewards Ziba with Mephibosheth's property. What did Ziba bring to David, and why was it significant? We know what he brought. He brought the mules and the raisin cakes and the summer fruits and those things. Why did he bring it? From his perspective, at least. What's that? Okay, so if nothing else, he's providing for the group that's there with David for their journey. You know, at least because I'm sure they didn't bring stuff to make anything, so this was provided for their journey. Of course, it also has an ulterior motive that what he's probably doing is showing his support for David during a time of crisis. And so he's trying to make good to the king, at least to look good in the king, but he did bring some stuff. What claim does Ziba make regarding Mephibosheth? What? Yeah, what he said was, now remember, Mephibosheth's grandfather was the king. And so it's easy to believe that Mephibosheth would probably say, well, I'm with the king. I'm going to be with my lineage. But remember, Mephibosheth received good from David, so it's surprising if he had actually gone over to the king. And from verse 4, how does David respond to Ziba's report? Okay. All that belonged to Mephibosheth, the grandson of the old king, that is now yours. Remember, several weeks ago, I mentioned how Joshua, the great man Joshua, he only made one mistake. It wasn't a sin necessarily, but it was a mistake that he made when he was in the promised land. It's the only thing that is ever said negatively about Joshua. Joshua is one of few characters in the Bible that there is no recriminations against him. Well, what happened, what he did was, you may remember, after they defeated the cities of Jericho and Ai, they were moving on. But before they moved, a whole group of people on these donkeys and camels that look like they're road weary, their clothes are all dusty and are falling apart. Their sandals have the straps on their sandals are not, holding on real well. I mean, it looked like they've been going a long time. And so what they did is they said, well, we are from Gibeah, a town many days' distance from this, but we have heard about your greatness and about how your God is with you. And we want to come and be your water bearers and your people who go looking for sticks for your fires and things of that nature. Now, what was God told regarding all the nations that they found in the land of Palestine? Yes, do not let your eye spare. Men, women, children, destroy all of them. Now, what he should have done, what Joshua should have done was, Lord, these people, they have come saying they're from a great distance, and to which God could say, they're like about 2 hours away, or 2 miles away, because Gibeah wasn't all that far away. But he didn't do that, but he made a covenant with them that they could be their water bearers and the ones who fetch sticks and things of that nature. So sadly, Joshua did not check. And we see David did not learn the lesson from Joshua because he took what somebody said without seeking to find out for himself the truth of the matter. I'm sure all of us in this room have probably gotten ourselves in trouble with somebody who heard something about us that wasn't true, and yet they took it as true. So we can understand how these sorts of things happen. Okay? In verses 5 through 14 on your sheet, it says we have Shimei's cursing. So, Shimei from Saul's family, so here's somebody else, a family, curses David, throwing rocks and accusing him of blood guilt. Abishai wants to retaliate, but David restrains him, interpreting the insult as possibly from God. So, verses 5 through 14. While I read that, you guys look at those questions and come up with some answers. 5 through 14. When King David came to Bahurim, behold, there were from there a man of the family of the house of Saul, whose name was Shimei, the son of Gera. He came out, cursing continually as he came. Must have been a parent to a T-ball kid or something. And he threw stones at David and at all the servants of King David. And all the people and all the mighty men were at his right hand and at his left. And thus Shimei said when he cursed, get out, you man of bloodshed and worthless fellow. The Lord has returned upon you all the bloodshed of the house of Saul, in whose place you have reigned. And the Lord has given the kingdom into the hand of your son Absalom. And behold, you are taken from your own evil, for you are a man of bloodshed. Did he say anything that was not true? Well, look at it. It's all found in verse 8. Did Shimei say anything that wasn't true? Everything he said was true. Now, you probably have heard the expression, speaking truth to power. Have you ever heard that expression, speak truth to power? That's what Shimei is doing, is he's telling something that is true. And David, well, he was king up until just a few hours earlier when he ran from Jerusalem. But he's the king, and he's hearing all these accusations made against him. So Shimei, a relative of Saul, he curses and he throws stones at David and at David's servants. Number 2, what does Shimei accuse David of? Yeah. Being present on the grassy knoll. No, it says being responsible for Saul's downfall and deserving of Absalom's rebellion. That's what he's saying. You deserve your son to kick you out of Jerusalem. And it's interesting because this isn't even in lieu of remember what Nathan told David was going to happen because of his sin with Bathsheba? What are some of the things that he said was going to happen? Okay, the sword shall never depart from the house of David. In verse 11 of chapter 12, it said, Nathan says to David, "Thus says the Lord, behold, I will raise up evil against you from your own household. I will even take your wives from before your eyes and give them to your companion, and he shall lie with your wives in broad daylight." And so he also said, "And I will take this child," which he already did that. So, now, what does Abishai say that David should do in the face of all these accusations that Shimei is making? Well, I didn't read all the way through 14, but let me begin verse 9 through 14 for you. Then Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, said to the king, "Why should this dead dog curse my lord the king? Let me go over now and cut off his head." Hello. But the king said, "What have I to do with you, O sons of Zeruiah? For if he curses, and if the Lord has told him, 'Curse David,' then who shall say, 'Why have you done so?'" And David said to Abishai and to all his servants, "Behold, my son who came out from me seeks my life. How much more now this Benjamite? Let him alone, let him curse, for the Lord has told him. Thus the Lord will look upon my affliction and return good to me instead of cursing in this day." So David and his men went on their way, and Shimei went along the hillside parallel with him. And as he went, he cursed and cast stones and threw dust at him. And the king and all the people who were with him arrived weary, and he refreshed himself there. What do we know about the nature of David? Yeah, he is a man after God's own heart. Well, the thing is that when we see David acting, what is always his fallback, the thing that he's going to do? When Saul came into the cave where David and his men were hiding, and yes, he put his trust in the Lord. When he came at night and took away the spear and the water bag of Saul while they were sleeping in Bethlehem, he didn't kill him. He kept his confidence in God. And so I think that's what it generally comes down to, Sherry, is that David wanted to put his trust in God, not necessarily the words of men or anything of that nature, but the words of God. And so the more he screamed the truth, the more David felt. Well, please don't think I ever need you screaming at me, sweetheart. Remember, one of the things that David said, we went over this several weeks ago when we looked at it. Do you remember the psalm that David wrote? Oh. Eric says hi to all. He's watching from work. You should be working. I appreciate that, but do your job. But remember, when Nathan told him, you are the man, you're the man that committed the sins and took Uriah's life from him and committed adultery with Bathsheba and all these things. And Nathan told him, the prophet told him, you're the man that did that. You are the bad guy. And so David wrote Psalm 51 as a response to what God had told him. And so what he says in, let's start in verse 16. He says, for you do not delight in sacrifice, otherwise I would give it. You are not pleased with burnt offering. And so what he's saying is, the sacrifices that God wants aren't necessarily another dollar in the collection plate or in the days of the Jews, another animal sacrifice or something. He says the sacrifices of God are a broken heart. A broken and contrite heart, O God, you will not despise. That's the kind of heart we need to have. What is the heart of our own heart? It's a heart that's willing to put its trust in God and is broken at its own sin. Does your heart break when you sin, or are you just glad you didn't get caught? David was very recalcitrant in this time. Continuing on, because we've got the time. Question number 5 is on the back of my sheet. What is admirable about David's response? He's going to let God do it. Absolutely. We see the humility of David here, allowing this guy to say all these things, throw rocks, dust, and all that sort of stuff. We see his humility and his willingness to accept shame, in trusting God for His justice and not man for his. So. Mm-hmm. Okay. Boy, and that's a good statement, because how often do we try to force God's hand in some way or other? Part of the thought regarding Judas is that he went and told the Pharisees and the scribes and the Sadducees about Jesus and all that sort of stuff because he was trying to force Jesus' hand. He believed that the Messiah was going to rise up and drive the Romans into the sea, and the empire of Israel would then become the empire that David had from the very beginning. But he didn't try to force God's hand. David didn't try to force his hand. And we shouldn't try to force God's hand either. Gerald? Yeah. Yeah. Sounds a little like Joseph in Genesis chapter 50 and verse 20, where all the things that his brothers had done, everything from throwing them down into the pit, selling them to the Midianite slavers, everything that went along with them, he said, yeah, you meant it for evil. God meant it for good. Boy, if we could remember these statements that men of faith a long time ago had said, it'll probably keep us out of some trouble. I mean, I like the fact you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. And, God is in charge. Vengeance is mine, says the Lord. I will repay. So David says, if vengeance is His, there's nothing I need to do. Yes, ma'am, Thelma? Mm-hmm. Okay, and you use Job for that? Yeah, Job is a classic man of great faith, and And he did allow God the time to do the things that he was doing. He realized it didn't seem fair to him, but he recognized that he's not under a situation where we conclude what is fair for God to do. But he did say, though he slay me, yet will I serve him. And so Job, he is a rather amazing man. And the thing is when you look at this, kind of cool, is when you look at the first chapter, they have the accounting of all the sheep and the cattle and the camels and all these that were stolen by the Sabaeans or whoever else. Somebody took them. At the end of the book, it says, and God returned to him. And then you look at those numbers, and it's twice as many sheep, twice as many cattle, twice as many camels as he had before. And not only that, it says, and they gave him 10 more children. Now, some people might say, well, wait a minute, he doubled all the other things, but he didn't double the number of kids. If you count heaven, yes, he did. Because his children were in heaven. That's the first 10. And the second group, that's the second 10. So yes, God did multiply the number of children that he had also. I think that was also his way to give Mrs. Job a little bit of discipline. Can you imagine her saying, wait a minute, we're going to have another child? Oh, yes. And another, and another, and another, and another. Say, curse God and die. That's for you. Okay, next, Absalom's bold rebellion. Verses 15 through 23. Absalom arrives in Jerusalem. Hushai greets him diplomatically. Ahithophel advises Absalom to sleep with David's concubines to demonstrate his dominance. And Absalom follows this vile counsel. So, verses 15 through 23 says, then Absalom and all the people, the men of Israel, entered Jerusalem, and Ahithophel with him. And it came about when Hushai the Archite, David's friend, came to Absalom, that Hushai said to Absalom, long live the king, long live the king. And Absalom said to Hushai, is this your loyalty to your friend? Why do you not go with your friend? Because he was a friend of his father's, David's. Then Hushai said to Absalom, no, for whom the Lord, this people, and all the men of Israel have chosen, his will I be, and I will be, and with him I will remain. What trouble with that paragraph. Verse 19, and besides, whom should I serve? Should I not serve in the presence of his son, as I have observed in your father's presence? So I will be in your presence. And so I'm going to be your servant, Absalom. That's what he's saying. So what role does Hushai play in this chapter? What is he doing? What is Hushai? We might even think of some current terms that would describe what he's up to. Well, he's buttering him up, but for what purpose? What's that? To spy on him. Yes, he's a double agent. Because he was there with David, but now David has sent him back as a spy on David. But yes, he is actually a double agent. He's pretending to be loyal to Absalom while remaining loyal to King David. Other thoughts? Okay, what advice does Ahithophel give Absalom? Wait a minute, I didn't read that far yet. Let me read verses 20 through 23. Then Absalom said to Ahithophel, give your advice. What shall we do? So he's the king's counselor. David had Nathan as a counselor, one of his counselors, and Gad as one of his counselors. And now Absalom's choosing his counselor, and he chooses Ahithophel. And Ahithophel said to David, go into your father's concubines, whom he has left to keep the house. Then all Israel will hear that you have made yourself odious to your father. The hands of all who are with you will also be strengthened. So he pitched a tent for Absalom on the roof. Remember, that's the roof of the king's palace, and the king's palace is taller than all the others around there. Because remember, King David, he looked over the side and he saw Bathsheba bathing on the roof of her house. So you had pretty good view from the roof. And so he goes on to say, so he pitched a tent for Absalom on the roof, and Absalom went into his father's concubines in the sight of all Israel. And the advice of Ahithophel, which he gave in those days, was as if one inquired of the word of God, So was all the advice of Ahithophel, regarded by both David and Absalom. So everybody thought Ahithophel was the man. We're going to find out next week he's not the man. Okay, so what advice does Ahithophel give to Absalom? Yep. Take all his concubines, and what you do is you make them your concubines, to not try to be too crass. Okay. Was this purpose of this act political or symbolic? That's a very political answer of you, brother. He said both. In what way would it be political? Okay, so the whole point of the thing was to diminish David in the eyes of the people. Okay, so in what way would it be symbolic? So whichever way the wind is blowing, I'm your man. Yes. What other thoughts do you guys have, the rest of you have? The purpose of Absalom's act in taking his father's concubines and laying with them on the hill, on the roof of his house so all Israel could see. Symbolic. Why? You're in charge. Yeah, if you can take a man's wife or his concubines, then obviously you're the big dog. You are the one in charge. Any other thoughts? Yeah. What Chris said was that what's David going to do? What's he going to do about this? Because he hadn't really done anything. Remember, the whole problem started because remember how Judah's son took Tamar and lay with her, and it says that the love that he had for her was only surpassed by the hatred that he had after that event. And so Absalom held his peace for over 2 years. Then he invited him to come to, the assassin to come to his house for a party that he was throwing. And when Absalom told his men, and when he is in his cups, when he is drinking enough to be a little bit tipsy, kill him. What did David do to Absalom because he murdered one of his brothers? Nothing. David didn't do anything. He let that go. And so I kind of feel patriotic all of a sudden. Okay. Yes, it is that time, boys and girls. So let me just give the answer for those last two. How does this fulfill Nathan's prophecy? Well, God said David's wives would be taken and defiled in public, and now it is happening. And what does this teach us about the mode of ungodly counsel? Wicked advice can be politically strategic, yet morally ruinous. And, if we had leaders who thought more about the morality of what they were doing as opposed to the political expedience of it, it probably would be better for our country as well as many others. So, next week, chapter 17. Be ready for it. Let me go ahead and close with a word of prayer. Father in heaven, thank you so much for this day that you've given to us. Father, not only have we had the privilege of coming before your throne and lifting our voices and hearts in praise and in prayer to you, we got to see you acting in our presence, taking the heart of Denise and turning it in the direction of you, Father. And now she has become one of your children. Oh, we're so grateful, Father, for the way that your love moves people to do those things that are right. Father, help our hearts to be softened enough that we will always choose to do the things that are pleasing in your sight. For we recognize, Father, that's part of our assurance. Doing those things gives us the confidence that we're going to have the promises that you've made for us. Thank you for your love for us, Father. Thank you for your Son. And is his name we ask this prayer.